They were this fabulous place downstairs. That's the only problem we have. They were.
Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Robbins,
Here.
Commissioner Rushton,
Present.
Commissioner Bailey,
Present.
Commissioner Wessel,
Here.
Commissioner Sotis Little,
Here, participating from Leelanau Township on Zoom.
Commissioner Alguier,
Here.
Commissioner Lautner. Present.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, our purpose of the meeting today is to conduct four different interviews. Before we introduce our first applicant, we'll see if there is any public comment. Yes, Mr. Mikowski.
Where do you want them to sit?
You can come forward and join Mr. Harris up here.
Thank you. I'm assuming I have 5 minutes to make my presentation.
You do?
At the September 9, 2008 executive session meeting, we made a presentation about statements made by historical people about governance. And we had Thomas Jefferson say, the whole art of government consists in the art of being honest. And we asked a question at the time, as commissioners and directing the administration of government, are we practicing the art of being honest to people at all times? The second one was done by Governor Palin of Alaska. But we are expected to govern with integrity and goodwill and clear conviction and a servant's heart. Our question then was, our commissioners in directing the administration of government, are we meeting the expectation to govern with integrity and goodwill and clear conviction and a servant's heart? The Gipper made some points. We do not place trust in one person or one party, but in those values that transcend persons and parties. The trust is where it belongs with the people, and it's a special kind of compact. As commissioners in directing the administration of government, do we place the trust where it belongs in the people? And do we have a special kind of compact with the people of given country? Therefore, with that in mind, we need to recall those because I'm now reading my belief in what's happening to the behavior and conduct of internet commissioners and other elected officials the way I see it on one single issue. It appears appropriate and timely for the commissioners and other elected officials to review these items I just read in light of the apparent gross mishandling of the removal of the finance and human resources functions and duties from the clerk. News reports have many times stated it's causing a dark cloud over our community. It is apparent that commissioners have failed to properly perform their duties in this manner according to those items I just stated, consistent with good governance. Thus, the first order of business today is for the board to apologize to the clerk and residents for apparently making bad, wasteful, and professional decisions in this matter. Again, this is a single issue I'm dealing with. If not, any new administrator may have difficulties functioning ethically, effectively, and to the best of their ability. Apologize now and demonstrate your competence to govern properly in all matters. Don't hesitate. apologizing and leave you a positive legacy to your posterity. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Any commissioner comment? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, the purpose of the meeting today is to interview candidates for the county administrator position. Our first candidate is Mr. Harris, Kyle Harris from St. Charles, Michigan. And we're going to ask him to take a minute, and we've received your paperwork, but the audience hasn't. If you could just quickly summarize. We have a challenge today because we have about 45 minutes to ask you a series of questions. Each of us have some questions. Commissioner Sotis Little has some from Zoom. It'll be my charge to keep us on schedule. And that means for each question, we need to probably confine our answer to just a couple of minutes at the max. So, Mr. Harris, would you like to take a minute and give us a little bit of background, review your resume, and briefly review your background, experience, and interest?
Sure. No, and first off, thank you for having me here today. I came up here a couple weekends ago just to go around the county and talk to businesses and things of that nature. So I really do appreciate being here today and have the opportunity to interview for this. My background, I am a Saginaw County Commissioner as well. This is my 6th and final year. I decided not to run for re-election, so that way I could advance my career. Going back a little bit further, I have about 10 years working in the state legislature, a couple of years in the Senate, and then the rest in the state house. And actually currently that's where I'm employed right now. I think when I applied for this position, I was still working for the charity industry, but since then I've moved on. While in the legislature, did a lot of constituent relations, whether it's DHHS matters, Department of Health and Human Services, unemployment, things of that nature, roads. Also did a lot of policy, transportation, natural resources, firearms, capital outlay, things of that nature. From the legislature, when my boss turned out, I went back to my parents' business for a little while. My wife and I, we were going to get married that year and had 4-week honeymoon planned, and I didn't want to go interviewing and asking for 4 weeks off right off the bat. So I just stayed with my parents' business until after the wedding, honeymoon, and then I got a new position in Lansing. It was just temporary. Sterling Corporation doing auditing of campaign finance reports. When campaigns had their treasurers couldn't keep up track of all the money, things got a little out of balance, so I was asked to come in and clarify a few of those. And then from there is when I went into Cherry Marketing Institute, hired as the Director of Grower Relations, where I was the liaison between the grower community as well as industry, MSU for the research facilities, and anybody else within that had an interest, stakeholders, Farm Bureau. Did lobbying. So I also did government relations. That was actually in the title when I applied for it, but when I got hired, they removed it, but still kept the responsibilities. So did lobbying with Congress and of different agencies, primarily the EPA. And while working for CMI, I represented the Michigan cherry industry, as well as the Wisconsin and Utah cherry industry. So primarily the 3 biggest states that grow tart cherries. While there, also did a lot of grant writing, marketing, working with budgets as far as when we write the grant, then I was charged with going out, finding these the subcontractors, influencers for these marketing grants, putting together the budget, putting together the lineup of how we wanted them to do things, and then it was up to me to make sure everybody adhered to the rules we had set forward, which was in the contract, as well as make sure we were adhering to our agreements with Michigan Department of Ag as well as the USDA. And then back in June, I parted ways with CMI, cherry industry, and went back to the legislature where, again, working with constituent relations and some policy. As well as then going back to kind of my county experience. Like I said, I'm in my 6th year as a commissioner. I've sat on the County Services Committee. I've spent 6 years on the Labor Committee. I'm actually now the Vice Chair. And more recently put on the Courts and Public Safety earlier this year or last year. serve on the board of directors for the Michigan Association of Counties, been a part of that for about 4 years. Served on the MAC Ag and Tourism, as well as Transportation Infrastructure. And I was chair of general government for all of one day, but then that's when I got elevated to the board of directors, and board of directors member of the board and chair committee. So I got promoted and demoted all at the same time. And then, as well as a member of the National Association of Counties, and sit on the Ag and Rural Affairs Committee. I think that's a quick summary. I apologize in advance because I will run a little bit long, so please feel free to set.
Thank you, Kyle. And now we're going to have each commissioner, we'll start with the longest serving commissioner, introduce themselves, but you don't get 2 minutes to do
I
that.
don't get 2 minutes. Okay, I'll try. I am Melinda Lautner, and I represent Solon and Casson Townships, who are down on the border of M72. And I'm largely agricultural, and I myself farm with my husband and our son, general farming, and seasonally 2 farm markets, so this is an extremely busy time of year. And I welcome you here today.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rushton?
Welcome, Kyle. My name is Deb Rushton. I'm Commissioner for District 2, which is the gateway to Leelanau County and Elmwood Township. I also represent Bingham Township. I have a split district. I'm a small business owner. I've served as a commissioner. This is my 10th year.
Thank you.
Rick Robbins, District 1, which is half of Elmwood and part of the cities incorporated in that. First term commissioner, retired law enforcement.
Go ahead.
Lois Bailey, resident of Suttons Bay Village, longtime business owner in that community, also involved in cherry farming and apples for part of our life, and newly elected to the county commission.
Should Patricia go next?
After you.
Okay. My name is Gwen Allgaier. I'm first-term commissioner. My district is the paradise in Leelanau County. We have Glen Arbor Empire and Cleveland Township and the National Park. It's gorgeous.
And Commissioner Sotis Little is on Zoom.
Yes, I am, and I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but welcome, Mr. Harris. And I'm the commissioner for District 5, which is Leland and Centerville Townships. Active also with the Leonardo Early Childhood Development Commission and the Leonardo Peninsula Economic Foundation. Looking forward to hearing you today.
And I am Ty Wessel, and I'm an 8th year commissioner, and I am at the north end of the peninsula, Northport is where I reside. I'm a retired educator. So for your first question, Mr. Harris, what is the most important responsibility of the county administrator, and what are the priorities and issues facing Michigan counties in general, and specifically Leelanau County?
I believe that the primary role of the administrator is to guide the board in their decision making. I know as a commissioner myself, sometimes I butt heads with our administrator a little bit because I feel like some information is kept a little closer at hand. And how am I, as a commissioner, supposed to represent my district and do what I believe my residents would like me to do if I don't have proper information? So I believe the administrator, while taking care of day-to-day business, is also largely charged with, like I said, keeping commissioners informed of any pertinent information. As far as issues facing Michigan counties, I know it tends to be right now personnel retainment, which I believe maybe is a little bit of an issue up here, just kind of from watching a little bit of your guys' videos, meetings, as well as funding. I think that's a big one. The state is putting a little bit of revenue sharing back in, but unlike townships who are constitutionally protected with their revenue sharing, counties, we just get whatever's left if they feel like sharing it. And I think that is problematic in many ways because I know you guys are talking about doing a compensation study in Saginaw County, wrapping ours up and dealing with some of the backlash after the fact. But when we do it and find out we need to pay our staff more, $2.5 million in our annual budget, where does that come from? So we either gotta pull out a fund balance, raise the cost of something, or cut something. So having those funds from the state are very crucial. And I think, even Leelanau County, with your roughly a $14 million budget, 15 in that ballpark, any little bit you can get is going to be not only helpful, but needed.
Thank you. Commissioner Rushton, you want to take the first question?
Sure. This is a two-part question. If you would, provide for us your definition of integrity, and in terms of ethics, what standards are you unwilling to compromise in your leadership role?
So my definition of integrity is doing the right thing regardless of the consequences. I believe that we are stewards of the public dollar. We are stewards of the government that the constituents have elected us to do. Or is your administrator, he's still, not elected, but I was appointed to be a good steward of public assets. I believe commissioners, administrators are to protect that and protect public trust at all costs, even if it's not always politically feasible or always, a friendly decision. As far as ethics, I can't see that there's really any reason why good governance, there shouldn't be a question of what ethics are you going to compromise. It should all go hand in hand. And if you have bad ethics, as administrator, as commissioner, you're going to have bad governance. Eventually, the voters are going to take care of that problem. I would hope.
So, clarify for me. Did you indicate that you're unwilling to compromise in your leadership role as far as your ethical standards?
Correct. Yeah, I don't think you should compromise ethics for anything.
Thank you.
Commissioner Evans?
Okay, next question's also two-part. We as a board, if we were asked to ask you, your current or former staff, how approachable are you, what would they say?
I would hope they say I'm very approachable. I know actually, and I was assuming we're just going to go back to county, at least that's what I'm default to. I have county staff actually find out more about what's going on in Saginaw County from the staff than they do from our own board or our own administrator, which is kind of sad at times. I always say, if you want to know what's really going on in the county, go ask the staff. Some of them have my cell numbers. I have no problem talking to them, and if they have issues, I will take it to the board, no problem. Or at the very least, question our administrator or chairman on any said issue. So I would hope that everybody would agree with me. I try to have an open door policy with our staff at Saginaw, and hope that they agree with me. But I'm certain there's a few out there who probably have a bone to pick because I like to vote no on a lot of things.
Okay, thank you.
I made a mistake because I did not introduce the reason you're here, the longest or one of the longest serving county administrators in the state, Chet Janik.
Kyle,
How you doing?
we spoke on the phone
Yes, sir.
a couple weeks
Pleasure
ago.
to meet you face to face.
Yep.
So, Kyle, time management and balancing multiple priorities is an important skill to be effective in this role. How do you make decisions about how you spend your time, and what strategies do you use for balancing those?
I think for starters, it's going to be, I try to base my agendas on what, priority. If something's, more urgent nature, and obviously it should be further on the ladder than something who's maybe, that's not quite addressed right away. Delegating when need be can be a vital tool in time management and getting things done in an efficient manner. And asking for help when need be. I also believe too that trying to go at it alone always is not always the right thing. Sometimes that can actually be counterintuitive. And, from experience, you're not gonna get everything done in your, 8 to 5. Sometimes you're gonna, be putting in weekends or hours afterwards. I know right now, if you guys working on your budgets, working on filling an administrative position, and some of the other things you guys got going on, I'm certain you guys are kind of staffed in meetings as well. So not all the time is it gonna, work out, we're just gonna have to work around it, make the best do.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sotis Little.
I think I have the next question. What would be your approach to establishing and maintaining a good working relationship with the Board of Commissioners? And the second part of that is, what is your understanding of the role of a county administrator relative to the relationship to the Board of Commissioners?
I'll try to turn on a little bit of an angle. I apologize, Commissioner, for not being able to look at you as I watch the board. But I believe for the first part of that, what I would do as an administrator is, you have to make an effort to keep open line of communication. If you have questions, have the open door policy, whether it's for commissioners, staff, whomever it may be. And like I said, just keeping that open line of communication, getting out to learning the county better, learning the issues better, I think would benefit both commissioners and myself as administrator. Like I said, 2 weekends ago, I came up and drove the county, at least to have a basic idea, because the last time I was in Leelanau was for just vacation and not work related. As far as my understanding of the administrator and the role of the board is, again, to make sure the board is well informed about all issues regarding the county, as well as anything else that may be. If there is potential state, federal rules, regulations that could affect county government, I believe that it is pertinent for the administrator, when appropriate, to make sure that the boards are well informed on those issues.
Thank you.
And I think mine is next. County government is a unique form of government. The Board of Commissioners and other elected officials, such as the clerk, sheriff, treasurer, etc., are co-employers. Have you ever asked a co-worker to perform a task and she refused? How did you resolve that conflict?
Right off the bat, I cannot recall a time or have asked someone to do something, a coworker. But, again, go back to in the charity industry, me getting up on tight deadlines or something of that nature, especially if we're trying to do reporting for grants. The state does not like to be late in their grant reporting. But I work the best we can. If a coworker was to say no, okay, can't really do much more than that. I'm not going to badger him to help me. A no is a no, and we're not going to say yes because I've pestered him 100 times over. Just deal with it, try to be, maybe they have a valid reason. And if that's the case, work with them a little bit on their schedule, your schedule, and try to come up with something. At the same time, that's no reason to drop the ball and not keep doing it on my own.
Thank you.
I'm next. So I'd like you to describe an experience that you've had in disciplining and/or dismissing an employee and the steps you followed in the process. Then please tell us about a time when you had to give feedback to an employee who displayed a lack of professionalism in their work relationship. What did you say? What standards did you set? What was the outcome?
Okay. There was only 2 times that I've ever had to be concerned with dismissing an employee. Once as a county commissioner, and at that point, that was very early on in my first term, and the ball had already been kind of set in motion for dismissing our health officer. And I really didn't get too into the details. I did do my homework as to why we were dismissing him, listen to what our administrator and chair had to say. That last I knew resulted in a lawsuit. But a time when I actually, was responsible for addressing the matter was when I was running a campaign for a gentleman for his state house bid. And I had the campaign manager and employee who just stopped showing up. I was counting on him to go out and outdo doors, parades, things of that nature. And he, after a week, I tried calling him. Oh yeah, I'll be there tomorrow. Well, he never showed up. And after 2 weeks, I called. We actually at that point had a third-party HR firm and discussed it with them and said, I wanted to go proceed forward with terminating this individual. And they told me, lucky for me, after 2 weeks of not showing up, he voluntarily quit. So, okay, great. I just left him that message on his phone because he wasn't at that point returning any way of communication back. So that resolved that issue. As far as having to address any unprofessionalism with employees, I have yet to cross that bridge.
Can you imagine what you would do?
Yes, actually. If I had an employee, a personnel issue that had to be addressed, we'd obviously bring them into the office. And since you do have an HR coordinator here as well, I'll just, putting myself in the administrative position. I am always a believer in having your HR director there to help address for legalities and any reason, protect the county as a whole. And address, get their side of the story, depending on what employee A over here made a claim of sorts. We'll want to talk to employee B, see what the issue is, get their side of the story, and address it accordingly. And I guess it really depends on what the issue is itself. The consequences could vary.
Have you ever been a member of a group where two of the members did not work well together? And what did you do with them to create a team atmosphere?
For commissioners. Sometimes it can be very contentious, as you may know, or maybe you haven't been lucky enough to cross that bridge yet. But there have been times where, particularly with budgets, there's always a fight. MSU extensions usually tends to rile up others in Saginaw County. We fund them out of our general fund. Every year when we get our proposed budget, they're always stripped from the budget, and then they always get put back in about a couple $100,000 later. Twice now, the voters have turned down a millage to fund MSU extensions, and that is, like I said, a highly contentious issue. And the best you can do at times is try to talk it out, but really, I know that some of my colleagues aren't going to say no. I'm not going to say yes at times. Fight the tongue and move on. And like I said, some of my colleagues took to the voters. The voters said no. And that's what best you can do.
Thank you.
Now we're going to move to the area of budget, and Commissioner Robbins has the first question.
If you would, please describe your experience with budget development, financial management, and developing grant proposals.
Okay. So with county government, probably fairly similar to you guys, our administrator puts together the proposal. The commissioners get to go through it, rip it apart, put it back together. So really nothing too advanced, probably that you're not familiar with. But going back to the cherry industry, like I said, part of the marketing was my responsibility. So I would work on the grants, writing them, figuring out what we needed, what our board of directors at that time wanted, and then we used the online influencers for TikTok and things of that nature. It's kind of slightly above my head, even if I do appear younger. But going through, finding out who offers what services, what that's going to cost me for those services, and then try to break it out. We knew that we told the state we would hire between 6 and 10. Okay, well if they're all, I have $80,000 and they're all $20,000 a piece, well I'm not going to get my minimum of 6. So just trying to go through, picking out who I think is going to cover, and we wanted to, cover a wide array of demographics. So putting that budget together, working with the individuals and subcontractors to see, okay, this is great, we like this, we don't like that, can we, rework that budget a little bit, and then adhere to it, with leaving a little bit of buffer room. We didn't like to give any money back to the state, but at the same time, we wanted to leave a little bit of a buffer room to make sure that there was a cost overrun of some sort, whether we bought the cherry product to send them off, sometimes postage is a little bit more, or something of that nature.
Very good. So I have a two-part question. Have you researched the county's past audits? And if so, what is your impression of our county's financial condition? I guess I'll stop right there right now.
Okay. I went through the year audit that was released. It was dated for December 31st, 2021, so I believe it was March or May, I recall. That's the only one I did go through. I am very impressed. Your debt obligations aren't that bad. At least from my perspective, Saginaw County is looking at $200 million in debt this year. So when I looked at your guys' debt, I'm like, wow, that's pretty good. I see that your expenses went up not quite a full 3%, while your revenue went up a little over 4%. So looking at your last couple of years, your 21 compared to 22, it looked pretty sound. But like I said, I didn't go back any further.
Okay, thank you. And part of this, the other part of my question, I think you've already answered a little bit, but if you'd like to expand upon it, that's fine. Could you please describe your experiencing in your establishing a county account? I'm so sorry. I shall begin again. My tongue trips me up sometimes. Please describe your experience in establishing a budget accountability system.
Within county governments, it's already there. The best I have always done is just voted no on the budget. Made my public statement as to why I didn't agree with it. Made sure my constituents understood why I was voting against the budget, and then I voted against it and watched it pass with flying colors. Going back to other areas of even in the legislature, just amongst my own boss, representative, senator, when looking at, when trying to do accountability, just reviewing what, the state or the legislature said they were going to do with the money, look at the auditor general reports, what did they really do? MDOT for a while there had spent several $1 million on train cars that were just sitting there and hadn't been used in many years. And so sitting on, or at least my boss is time sitting on a transportation committee, I made sure to red flag that, made sure he knew it, and then he could question MDOT in public meetings.
Thank you.
Up to me again. What are the 3 effective leadership qualities you think are the most important? How have you demonstrated these qualities in your past or current position?
I think 3 great leadership qualities are, 1, being able to listen, 2, being able to communicate effectively, and 3, just really not being too presumptuous of what's going on. Being able to listen, when I go out to my constituents, when I go to township board meetings, things of that nature. And I know I was one of the few in my county that actually go, but I believe that's where you're really going to hear some of the concerns going on, unless it's a campaign season, you're going to the door. But being able to listen and having that open door policy, like I said, some of the staff being able to call my cell number or get a shooting meeting now, and then addressing it accordingly. So I think that's, in my mind, one of the biggest things you can do as a good leader. Having that open communication is, I'm not going to tell you one thing and do another. So when staff would call me or, constituents had an issue, I can either just, tell them what they want to hear, or just be honest and say, hey, that's outside of our purview, or I disagree with you, but at least I always found it prevalent to make my point known where I stand. I think the citizens have a large distrust of political leaders, to put it mildly. And I always try to at least not dodge around questions or answers and just be very direct with them. So far, that's suited me well. But I think that is what one needs to do in any type of leadership role. And then as far as just not being too presumptuous, it kind of goes hand in hand with, listening, but no knee-jerk reactions. I think it's worth listening to multiple sides of any topic, even going out, doing a little bit of research on your own, pulling facts together. So I always tell folks when I'm making a vote, I'm not going to take a stance until I know that I hear both sides. And then at that time, I will make a vote based on the best information I have at that point in time. And I really think that's the best way to go about it without just aligning myself with either side, one way or the other.
Thank you.
You're anticipating, this is good. I do have the next question. Mr. Harris, you've talked a little bit about your experience with the legislator. And this question relates to that. And there's two parts. I'm going to do the first part and then the second after you've had a chance to answer the first. And that is describe the methods you would use to effectively relate to and work with elected officials, key leaders in the Leelanau County and its communities.
No, I think, to be able to work effectively with key officials, elected officials in the county and in the legislature is to, again, back to open communications. If the legislator needs something, then by all means, trying to help them out, because it's a two-way street. I've had legislators ask me for favors back in their districts, as far as, hey, what's going on with this? What are you hearing? It's the flavor of the week, more or less. As well as if they have office hours, just showing up, especially if they're going to be new, or in this case, if I'm new, just showing up, making those introductions, leaving a business card and a way for them to get a hold of you, whether it's the legislator themselves or their staff. And then just pretty much the same for key officials in the community, not even just elected, but other community leaders. I think that's very, very important. Just trying to be available.
Can you give us an example of where you have built collaborative partnership relationships?
I have built actually at the county, more so the Michigan Association of Counties. I have built great relationships with commissioners from multiple other counties. Some of them are now in the legislature, so I have no problem being able to call them up, text them for an issue. Sometimes they follow back with me and ask me questions, whether it's pertaining to, like I said, ARPA, more of a federal topic there. But no, I think Michigan Association of Counties has been a great thing from my perspective to build those relationships. And then if there's an issue and you're in a conference, hey, you're building a new jail. Well, we just built a new jail. Let's talk about it. Things of that nature.
Is there a particular example that comes to mind where you have actually taken the role of actually building a collaborative partnership between groups?
Not with a legislator or local elected officials, but when working with the cherry industry, yes, I worked with a few other leaders of commodity groups from across the country to file a lawsuit against EPA over pesticide regulations. It was an issue where we jumped through all the hoops, submitted all the letters, tried to lobby Congress. EPA kept going down the road it was going to, and we worked as a group, coalition, and I was right there with several of them to pull together funds and other individuals who could join before filing a lawsuit.
Thank you. That's a good example.
Commissioner Bailey.
Okay, where am I now? Oh, here we are. Name one of your best accomplishments, including where the assignment came from, your plans in carrying it out, how you eventually did carry it out, and any obstacles you overcame. What types of problems do you most enjoy tackling? Give us some examples of such problems you faced. What did you enjoy about them?
I have one example that should really cover both.
Okay.
So my district back home, I represent the largest district in Saginaw County, almost a third of the county. 8 townships, 13,000 residents, and they tend to vote no a lot on villages. I think in my 6 years, at least 10 villages, and I've only been wrong on 2. One of them being the animal center. The current animal center that we're using is in the city of Saginaw. And the initial discussion came up is, do we need a new facility? I said no. My district didn't want it. Other folks said yes, and it went to a vote. And my district voted against it, but the rest of everybody else, it was approved. So now we're building a new animal center. And now where's it going to go? In the city says, oh, we'll give you free land to put this animal center on. Never mind that it has the potential to be contaminated and you want to spend millions of dollars remediating that site. Or we can go out a few miles and buy land for a few $100,000. And I was still upset with the idea. I didn't think we needed it. Now, the argument came down to free land or not free land. Our staff wanted to be out because of safety concerns being in the city. My also concern was, again, that potential remediation cost if it was contaminated. So it came down out of our 11 commissioners, 5 wanted it in the city, 5 wanted it out in the township, and then they started coming to me because they were jockeying for the vote. And I told people that we lost the argument on need, we lost the argument on just the general overall how we were going to go about it. So now the best I can do for my constituents is capping or reducing the cost. So one of the deals I made was that they would cap the cost at about $10.5 million for this new facility if I agreed to put it out in the township. Otherwise, it was this grand facility that was going to be a few $1 million more than that 10.5. It was completely unnecessary in my opinion. And at that point, my best thing was to watch out for my constituents' interests. And now this facility was going to be even further away from them, so it was going to be over an hour for someone in my district to get to. So I find that as an accomplishment. I can say that I did work with some of my colleagues to stop the cost of something from getting too out of control. I think $10.5 million is already too much. As well as, I think that's, really what I was there for, is to just try to stop kind of runaway government spending. And I'm sorry, does that answer both? I don't think it really answers your second for that question very well.
It's not in this question. Do you have a brownfield authority?
We have, yes, but I don't touch it.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't do anything with it.
Okay.
For the last question, Mr. Robbins.
No, it's right.
Or Commissioner Rushton, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Can you tell this board, in all of your experiences, what is the riskiest decision you've had to make? What was the situation? Tell us what happened. And tell us about a time when you had to make an unpopular decision.
Again, I can answer that with one example. The health departments. We have the main health facility in Saginaw, and then there was, I believe it was 6 outlying satellite health clinics. And a couple of years ago, we were doing an analysis of the health department, looking at some of these clinics, and it didn't appear to be serving the purpose that they should. They're not always open full-time. The county didn't own the facilities. It would be like a third-party group, community group that would own it, and then we would just have our staff go a couple times a week, month, however it may be. I had 2 facilities in my district and one very closely that served the westernmost part of it. These facilities didn't appear to be doing much. One was hemorrhaging money left and right, bringing the other ones down. So the others did even bring in enough money to break even. The third one was losing money left and right, and it wasn't. So I voted to close them all down. It was not popular in my district. Some of the commissioners weren't for it. I find it risky because that could have ended my career right then and there. But what we did is, on the flip side, is we went out and purchased, or had the health department purchase, a mobile unit that could then go out. So we got away from the brick and mortar that were older buildings, not manned 24 hours, and some just not being very efficient in their cost and expenses. So this mobile unit we went out can now go anywhere in the county when it needs to. Constituents did have to go into Saginaw if they needed for a short while of time. But I believe by modernizing and going to this mobile unit, we can now do more, and we don't have that brick and mortar infrastructure.
Whose idea was it to put in the idea of a mobile unit? Was it?
I don't know where that really came from exactly.
Was it brought to your board for an approval?
We did have to end up approving it, because then the health department, when they went for a millage increase a few years ago, that was part of their increase.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of our questions. Do you have anything that you'd like to ask us?
No, I mean, I know I was kind of at the bottom of your 7 candidates, so hopefully I changed a few minds. I guess I had nowhere to go but up. I don't really have any questions from you guys. Like I said, I tried to do some of my homework and answer some of any concerns that I may have had. Other than just generally, I assume by November, December is when you're looking at your start time, correct?
We have not decided on an exact timetable, but we're taking our time and we're going to talk about that later.
No, that's fine, that's fine. Other than that, no, I have no questions for you, sir.
Commissioners, any last questions for Mr. Harris?
I just want to make a statement. I wanted to correct the statement that you made. You were not at the bottom of our list. All of our candidates we look at is at the top of the list until they take themselves to the bottom of the list.
Okay, I will accept that.
We thank you. Oh, Patricia Sotis Little, yes.
Yeah, just one question. And perhaps you covered it and I just didn't focus on any other answers, but you had mentioned that you voted no on your budgets and your county budgets in Saginaw. And I just wondered, what was the impetus that caused you? And was this just one time, or is this, I kind of got from your statements that this was a continual practice. So I just wanted to know what motivated you for that vote, and if you could share that, if you're comfortable sharing it.
No, that's a great question, and I have no problem. I always say if I can't explain my votes, then I shouldn't be at the board. I voted against 5 of the 6 budgets. The one budget that I did vote for was my first budget, and that was because I was new and naive. Generally, I vote against them because I think there's a lot of waste. For instance, our judges, a couple of years ago, tried to tell us that they are state employees, not county employees. Therefore, there were some parts of county policy they did not want to follow. And they threatened to take it to court and yada, yada, yada. However, when it came time to the budgets and we pulled their county health insurance out of that budget, if you're a state employee, go get it from the state. They threw a fit, and we better put their insurance back in. And at the end of the day, it was $100,000. So with a almost $200 million budget at that time, 100,000 was really a drop in the bucket. But as a matter of principle, I think we waste money in a lot of areas. Since I got on the board, our budget was roughly 165 million. And so in 6 years, it's now, I think the proposed budget is 204, with 208 in liabilities. So our debt is far exceeds what our budget's going to be. And at the end of the day, they don't need my vote to carry these budgets. I can say no, I can vote no, and usually there's going to be 9 yeses, 9 to 10 yeses. So.
Thank you, I appreciate your honesty and sharing that. Thank you.
We want to thank you for your interest, and you'll be hearing from us.
All right,
Thank you
very much, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Sorry this isn't a sunshiny Leelanau day.
Hey, I got my sunshine, like I said, a couple weeks ago, so.
Let's take a short adjournment.
Yeah.
Hello, Mr. Palmer. Thank you for joining us. These are the initial interviews for our county administrator position, and we have scheduled 4 of them today. We have 45 minutes to visit with you. We sure thank you for your interest. Before we start, we're going to ask each of the commissioners to introduce themselves to you very briefly, and then we will begin asking you some questions. Commissioner Lautner.
Sounds great, thank you.
Okay, you did have the other gentleman introduce himself first.
Shall we do that? Yeah.
Well, if you're
Yeah,
insistent.
Mr. Fulmer, would you give us a brief overview of your experience? We have read your resume, but we want to make these interviews available to the public, so if you could just give a brief overview.
Well, I'll start just by saying I was born and raised for much of my childhood in Traverse City. I grew up on the Old Mission Peninsula. My father was an orthopedist in town, and in the late 70s, he decided he wanted to be a small town doctor in a small town in East Tennessee. So I went to high school in a much different community in Tennessee, in the foothills of the Smokies. Since I went to undergraduate and grad school at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. My graduate degree is in regional planning, focused on public administration, but also housing policy and real estate finance. And so after graduate school, I don't know if you've noticed on my resume, I worked quite a bit in resort type communities, mostly in the Rocky Mountains with housing development. Specifically Sun Valley, Idaho, and Crested Butte, Gunnison, Colorado. Housing certainly was a hot button topic in those communities. We see it certainly in the Grand Traverse region, Leelanau County specifically. Much of my work, both in public and private sector, has been in the financial realm. In the public sector, I worked briefly here in Traverse City for the Traverse City Housing Commission. At that point, when I took over, it was a troubled housing agency. So we dealt with HUD several times a month with HUD reviews. It wasn't a real pleasant thing, but by the time I left, we had turned things around financially for the commission. For the most part, though, I worked in public agencies focused on housing, but a lot of our issues, I worked with land conservancies, with PDR and TDR programs through housing and resort communities. That, more specifically, I really built the funding and the financials of those agencies while I've been with them.
Thank you. We do appreciate your interest, and we're going to start with our longest-serving commissioner. Commissioner Lautner will introduce herself.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Melinda Lautner. I represent Solon and Casson Townships, and I'm a farmer by day. I'm a farmer by evening, I guess. And I welcome you to our interview today.
Mr. Fulmer, welcome. My name is Deborah Rushton. I'm District 2 Commissioner of Elmwood Township. I've been a commissioner this is my 10th year. I'm also a small business owner.
Hi, Rick Robbins, District 1, which is part of Elmwood Township, and a little portion of the city is annexed into my district, retired law enforcement.
Lois Bailey, parts of Bingham Township and parts of Suttons Bay Township. I live in the village of Suttons Bay. Longtime retail business owner and involved in cherries and apple farming.
Welcome, Mr. Falmer. My name is Gwen Allgaier. I too am a first-term commissioner. My district is Glen Arbor, Empire, and Cleveland Township, the National Park area.
And Patricia?
Good afternoon, Mr. Palmer. My name is Patricia Solis Little, and I'm been a commissioner for 8 years now. My district is District 5, which is Centerville and Leland Township, and I'm a retired faculty member from MSU in Biomedical Engineering.
And my name is Ty Wessel, Mr. Fulmer, and I'm District 4 Commissioner, Northport, Leelanau Township, and a little bit of Suttons Bay. And this is my 8th year on the commission. And sitting next to me is our almost the longest serving administrator in the state of Michigan, Chet.
Good afternoon. As Ty pointed out, I'm the county administrator, and I'm the one that's hoping to retire here at the end of the year. And that's why you're in this interview.
So thank you for joining us. We have a series of questions that each of us are going to be asking you. We'd like to start out with this question, if you would. What is the most important responsibility of the county administrator, and what are the priorities and issues facing Michigan counties in general, and specifically Leelanau County?
Well, I think the most important aspect of a county administrator's role is really to provide unbiased and at times exhaustive information to the Board of Commissioners so that they can make educated decisions on things that come before them. Some of the issues that I see, certainly in the Grand Traverse region and Leelanau County specifically, it's kind of like a growth, an abundance of riches can also be a burden at times. And so, you have a very desirable community to live in. My family still owns a farm on the Old Mission Peninsula. It's the farm I grew up on. Leonard County and Old Mission remind me somewhat of each other. Hopefully the politics in Leonard County isn't quite as divisive as in Old Mission Township, but when we see communities, and I certainly experienced this in a lot of resort communities where it's not a very desirable place to live. What that does is it drives up property pricing and values. Certainly folks with more money than many of the working stiffs that I've been in the past move into the area, and it makes it very difficult to afford to live there for many people. Additionally, the tourism, which drives the economy of a lot of resort communities, adds traffic on our roads, creates congestion that a lot of the folks that move there are looking to escape. And so balancing certainly growth with expectations, trying to promote community and preserve community by managing the cost of living, which can affect certainly people's opinions of millage and property taxes, mill rates certainly. So I think it's a very complex issue that faces a lot of what I consider resort communities. Leelanau County is one, with certainly several townships and cities or villages within the county. The balance between township governance and county governance, I know, is an issue in the state of Michigan. And certainly, I think an administrator is really tasked with working with the board of commissioners to provide the information, but also try and provide some advice and counsel regarding issues that comes before.
Thank you. We'll now ask some questions. We'll start out with Commissioner Rushton.
If you would, provide us your definition of integrity and in terms of ethics with standards, and what standards are you unwilling to compromise in your leadership role?
Well, I certainly think for me, I answer to two different boards presently. I have a board of commissioners that I answer to who are appointed commissioners, and then I have a board of directors for a nonprofit development corporation that I manage as well. Providing unbiased facts to my boards. When I'm asked for my opinion, I provide it, but I don't try and direct my boards as to what my personal feelings are. To me, that's a very ethical position in public administration. That's a requirement of a public administrator. Certainly, it's a requirement of a director of a public agency, which is what I've been for several years now. When I stepped into my position here in South Dakota, Sioux Falls is growing very rapidly. I had an assistant director for our Housing and Redevelopment Commission, which is the public housing forum. And we had a board meeting, and we had some very bad economic news to deliver to the board. She's like, well, can't you just gloss it over? That's not something that I'll ever do for a board that I answer to. I'll certainly deliver the bad news if necessary, because I'd like to be congratulated on the good news I deliver as well. So to me, integrity is providing honest, unbiased support and information to my board of commissioners.
And how does that same definition apply to staff or employees?
It applies almost word for word to staff. And I have to say that human resources and staffing is probably one of the more challenging duties that I've had in my career. It can be time consuming at times. It can be frustrating at times. I think my staff presently trust that when I say I'm going to do something or approach our board about something on their behalf, that I follow through. And that my word is worth something to them, and that they can rely on what I tell them. And so I do have an example of that. When I first got to South Dakota, we did have a public employees union at the Housing Commission. For 2 years, I negotiated on behalf of the board with the public employees union. The employees, once they got to know me, and I was a big proponent of increasing staff salaries and preserving the benefits level. We did have some major tension between our board of commissioners and the union. I met with the employees and the union paying employees as well. And the employees after 2 years decided to vote out of the union. But since then, I followed through on everything that I promised them at the time. One item of which that I promised was to raise their salaries by, I think, 35% in 4 years, which we just accomplished this year.
Thank you.
I don't think that would have happened had my commission at the time kept having at each other.
I would remind us that we need to make sure we run through all these questions, so let's move on.
We as a board, if we were to ask you about your current or former staff, how approachable you are, what would they say about you?
My current staff, I have fired a few staff members, so there are some that probably not have the best opinion of me. I think my current staff would say I'm fair, I'm honest, I'm good-natured. I think they would also say I'm fairly demanding of them, in that I have initiated a lot of quality review procedures at the Housing and Redevelopment Commission that did not exist in a formal way prior to my arrival. And so I think I would be considered fair, honest, good-natured, but somewhat demanding too, as far as performance goes. And I think most of my past employees that weren't dismissed, maybe would probably say the same thing.
Okay, thank you. Time management and balancing multiple priorities is an important skill to be effective in this role. How do you make decisions about how you spend your time, and what strategies do you use for balancing multiple priorities?
Well, I think first and foremost, in my current position, I listen to my commissioners, and they kind of set the priorities for the items that are before me. I don't have a formalized decision tree that I use, but I certainly keep a lot of lists of the decisions and the issues that are foremost in my commissioners' thoughts. I advance those as they request that I do. That's probably one of the more challenging aspects of my current role. We have a lot of irons in the fire. I'm sure a county commissioner does as well. I do rely on my commissioners to set what they think are the priorities for my commission to follow. And I follow through with those and kind of rank them internally and direct my staff. I have 6 different departments that I manage and direct, and certainly I meet with staff frequently to kind of assign duties as such. Because I think for me to be the most effective, I do empower my staff to really help carry the load. If I didn't do that, I couldn't, delegating authority and empowering your staff is crucial. In any public position, I think in any position in business, it's crucial in order to get the priorities handled, but also the finer details handled as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Fulmer, I have the next question, and it's going to be something that's familiar to you because it plays into what you're doing now. And that is, what would your approach be to establishing and maintaining a good working relationship with the Board of Commissioners? And what is your understanding of the role of the county administrator relative to the relationship to the Board of Commissioners?
Well, I think I answered that somewhat initially, and I certainly read the job description for the county commissioner for Leelanau County. I do believe that the county commissioner and any county administrator and county commissioner, it's much like I do with my board here, my board of commissioners here. Oftentimes when there are issues, especially pressing issues before the board of commissioners, the more information and unbiased information as an administrator, I do have opinions, obviously. I'm a human being and a person, but I try to distill that out of how I approach issues before my board of commissioners here. Certainly a county administrator, I would think, is the same way. In that empowering your commissioners with information is crucial to perhaps coming to a consensus on certain issues. I we reached consensus. Of course, I have an appointed board of commissioners here. We reach consensus more often than not on those issues, which I feel blessed to be in that situation. But the only reason we do that is because I provide the information that they require to feel like they're not hanging in the wind and they can answer questions and respond to issues from an informed position, which is key for all of us not to feel insecure in our decision making. I don't know if that answered the question or not.
That did. No, you expanded on your original comments very nicely. Thank you.
So I'm up next, right? County government is a unique form of government. The Board of Commissioners and other elected officials, such as the clerk, the sheriff, and the treasurer, etc., are co-employers. Have you ever asked a coworker to perform a task he or she refused? How did you resolve the conflict?
I don't think I've ever had somebody refuse something I've requested, but I can tell you how I might respond. I don't think that I'm not very heavy-handed with my employees as far as I really try to foster an environment of cooperation between my employees. And believe me, some of my departmental managers do not get along. But I think the environment that we've created is such that if an employee or department head were to disagree with something I wanted he or she to do, I think it would be an atmosphere where a discussion would ensue. I'm fairly fairly accommodating to differing views with my staff, and I welcome them. But ultimately, I would more than likely sit down with that individual and walk through why he or she doesn't want to perform a task and explain why I feel it necessary for them to do so. Never been in that situation. I think there's enough respect between me and my employees and certainly my department heads that we haven't gone there before. I'm pretty persuasive though. I don't think that most people would tell me no. From an employee supervisor perspective.
Thank you.
Mr. Fulmer, describe the experience you have had in disciplining and/or dismissing an employee and the steps you followed in the process. Then tell us about a time when you had to give feedback to an employee who displayed a lack of professionalism in their work relationship. What did you say?
Could you repeat that last part of that? I didn't quite pick up.
Well, why don't I ask the first part first? Describe an experience you've had in disciplining or dismissing an employee and the steps you followed in the process.
Well, we do have an employment law attorney that is a contract support staff for the Housing and Redevelopment Commission. And I've dismissed a few employees for unprofessional and dishonest behavior. First, I engaged with the employee to correct his or her behavior. I should say, I give employees, unless it's extremely bad behavior or inappropriate behavior, I give employees an opportunity to correct the behavior. I do a verbal and written intervention with employees first. I usually provide a timeline for correction. Typically, that's 60 to 90 days. It can be up to 6 months, depending on the behavior that we want to see changed. And if the behavior doesn't change, then I seek counsel to pursue the appropriate steps for dismissal. Never do I dismiss somebody or get involved in that procedure without first engaging the employee, always in writing, usually personally and verbally, initially. There have been occasions where the behavior, sexual harassment was one, where the behavior was significant enough and I thought damaging enough for immediate dismissal was warranted. So I don't know if that kind of explains kind of the process I pursued. I do look to remedy the behavior of the situation first.
I think you answered the second part of that question. So thank you. The next question is, have you ever been a member of a group where two of the members did not work well together? What did you do to get them to create a team atmosphere?
I have that situation presently. I have a finance director who's nearing retirement, very set in his ways, and I have a development director for our private development corporation who are a bit like fire and gasoline when they get in the same room. We have certainly met together often. And I think if I'm present in the room with them, everything goes well. It's when they're left to their own devices that things can go a little killer. And I think it's been a process. And it's taken about a year for them to really understand the approach to one another. The approach to certainly the financials and how my director of development runs his financials and how my director of finance for the commission runs his, because the commission is kind of an umbrella entity that provides funding at times for the nonprofit housing development group. And so really it's been a process. I value both of them. I think they're both quality employees and respected employees by fellow staff. It has been a process of sitting down with them and getting them to understand each other's approach, for them to work through their differences. Now, do they like each other? No, I don't think they do. Do they respect each other and work together more constructively now? Absolutely. But it hasn't been immediate. It's been a year's process. And that's why I said HR sometimes is not the most pleasant task that I undertake because we all have our differences. And sometimes, unfortunately, in a work setting, the differences don't mesh well together.
Thank you very much.
Next is the budget. Describe your experience with budget development, financial management, and developing grant proposals.
Well, currently, I have a budget for two different entities. One, we run a budget for the commission of about $15 to $16 million per year. And our year-end budget is September 30th, so I'm already fully engaged in our annual budget process for the commission. I'm very involved. I work directly with my accounting and finance offices to compose our budgets for the year. The commissioners, certain, from a programmatic perspective, certain areas of emphasis they'd like to see in initial budget proposals. And so we work with the commissioners. I work very closely with our president of the commission, or commission chairperson, to help devise the budget. We usually have about a 2 to 3 month process reviewed by the commissioners of our budget. I also have a secondary budget, which depending on the year, ranges from $5 to $10 million. That has a board of directors of 9 people that review that budget as well. We pursue many grants every year. I have 3 grant proposals due tomorrow, and a low-income housing tax credit application that's due to South Dakota Housing, which is South Dakota's version of MISHDA, on Wednesday. That drives a lot of what we do, or the grants that we bring in. We don't have tax revenues at the Housing and Redevelopment Commission, nor do we have revenues like that for the nonprofit called Affordable Housing Solutions. We rely heavily on grants that are annually awarded. Presently, we have a MacArthur Foundation grant that we were part of proposing that I think 4 communities in the U.S. were awarded the MacArthur Foundation grant, and that is approximately $4 million to Affordable Housing Solutions. And that grant we pursued in conjunction with the city of Sioux Falls and the Minnehaha County where Sioux Falls resides. We've been working with the justice departments as well as correctional departments on that grant. It's called Just Home, and it's really to focus on investment in housing for those that are justice impacted. What we want to do is try and reduce the recidivism rate of those being released from corrections. Oftentimes, they don't have stable quality housing to reside in. And so part of that grant, we just made a $3 million award to a local developer and a nonprofit entity called Glory House, which will, as part of the Wednesday application for tax credits, which will produce a 51-unit supportive housing property in Sioux Falls to support justice impacted families. And so everywhere I've been, I'm always heavily involved in the budget process, working with boards to develop budgets. In addition, I don't know how many grants I've applied for and managed, but certainly we work really closely with the city and state here in South Dakota, ARPA funds awards as well. And we've received some ARPA awards for infrastructure support development to support housing development. And so I'm pretty well versed in the public budgeting process.
Thank you. If I may, I want to make sure I understand what you were saying just now. So your justice impacted, was that for those who had been incarcerated or for victims, if I understood what you were doing?
It's for those who have been incarcerated.
Okay.
There is part of the grant for victim services as well. We are the housing partner on that particular grant, and so our emphasis is on provision of stable quality housing for those coming out of the Department of Corrections.
Certainly. Okay. Thank you.
There's a state penitentiary in Sioux Falls as well, so that has an impact on some of the populations and the necessity for some quality, stable housing.
Okay. Thank you. Have you researched the county's past audits? And if so, what is your impression of Leelanau County's financial condition? And please describe your experience in establishing a budget accountability system.
Okay, I've researched the budget more than the audit, but I happen to know that Leonardo County's position, and certainly the audits, I do believe have been predominantly clean audits in the past. We have annual audits every year for our public commission here as well. And I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Could you repeat?
That's okay. How would you describe, please describe your experience in establishing a budget accountability system?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Well, as far as the budget accountability, that kind of, in my past, has always started and ended with my department. and the executive director's department. We assign, obviously, our budgets are assigned per departmentally. I meet with department heads monthly to review budget numbers specifically. And so I hold my department heads pretty much to task on maintaining the budget, following budget integrity. If ever there's an issue though, I certainly involve my board of commissioners. There are times, one example is recently in Sioux Falls, we've had several significant windstorms. It's kind of like the one that struck Glen Arbor, I don't know, when was it, 2015 or 2016, where these shelf cloud systems that come in 3 times to Sioux Falls and cause significant damage to properties and clean up expenditures that certainly weren't budgeted for. So I've always been pretty open with my board and both budgets that have enough reserves to handle issues that might arise both departmentally or simply from acts of nature. But accountability usually, I place budget accountability squarely on my department. The finance department that I work with and our staff accountants can only do so much. It's, in my opinion, the executive director or in many ways the county administrator's job to manage budgets accordingly and hold staff accountable to those budgets.
Thank you.
Before we go on to the next question, I'd like to ask a follow-up because part of that question that Commissioner Lautner asked you was your impression of the county's financial, and I know you said relatively clean audits, but what's your impression of our county financial situation?
And I'll have to say, I didn't look that closely. I looked more closely at the budget and how it's composed departmentally, and I think it was $14,837,000 in revenues and expenditures that's projected for 2022. I didn't necessarily look at the health of the county's budget or financial situation at this point in time.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Bailey.
Yes. What are the 3 effective leadership qualities you think are the most important? How have you demonstrated these qualities in your past or current position?
Well, I think first and foremost, honesty is probably the most important. As I said earlier, without being honest with certainly my boards, but also my employees and the community as a whole, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing or be able to hold the positions I've held and be successful in. Presently, we're very successful here. A lot of that I certainly contribute to my staff. They work very hard. I think a lot of people don't think public sector employees work hard. I would disagree significantly. But, honesty and being able to talk very clearly and concisely with folks and tell them the truth, whether it hurts or not, is a definite and important asset to have and to maintain. Next, I would think intelligence and being able to transmit information in a coherent manner is a very crucial skill. We're dominated now in society full of data that you can be inundated with from every direction. It can be overwhelming at times. I think for me, one of my challenges as an administrator, director, is to distill the information, as I said, as unbiased, in an unbiased way, and provide it to not only those who I work for, but also those who work with me and around me. And lastly, I would say a sense of humor is a definite necessity. The last few years have not been easy with COVID and the pandemic, and it certainly hasn't been easy for a ton of my staff people. All of us have been really taxed in many ways. And so keeping good humor and in the workplace, I have very good humor with my board of commissioners presently, both boards. But they know when the proverbial crap hits the fan, that I'm going to be there to provide them with information and hopefully some calm and a sense of, direction without panic.
Mr. Felmer, he got the next question. You actually have touched on most of this question, but and that's through your MacArthur, your budget discussion, and by the way, congratulations, that's why I mentioned that.
Thank you.
But I'm going to read it to you just to see if you want to add anything more to it. And that is, describe the methods used to effectively relate to and work with elected officials, key leaders in the Leelanau County and its communities. And then provide an example of where you build collaborative partnerships. I already did that, but is there anything more?
Well, I have probably a better example than Arthur Foundation grant and working cooperatively with law enforcement and justice officials on that. I'm very engaged with not only my board, but communities where I live. Here in Sioux Falls, I can't tell you how many meetings I attend every month that are not housing related. But I probably attend 24 meetings a month, which is a challenge to get all of my work done and attend the meetings. But the point is, my commissioners require that I be the face of the commission and help deliver a message to our community and work with the community and gather information from community members. I think I'm pretty engaging when folks meet me. My wife might differ with that. I have a good example. I think Gunnison and Crested Butte, Colorado. I was living in Traverse City when we had the recession back in 2009 through 2012 or so. I was a real estate consultant and development consultant at the time. So in 2009, when the recession, the market crashed, my phone stopped ringing. And so I did all sorts of different jobs I still have a mortgage for my farmhouse on Old Mission. And that's a different story, but I won't get into that right now. So I looked to find Colorado was a state that was relatively unaffected by the recession, like certainly the state of Michigan was. And I took a job as a director of a county housing authority, which is a housing commission in Colorado, in a resort area. And so when I got there, we had 3 municipalities in Gunnison County that kind of had what were considered to be significant workforce housing needs. And so after meeting with a lot of elected officials and residents, I decided, and I kind of called up the county manager of Gunnison County, said, I think we need to be regional because we've got to have a cohesive effort to try to solve some of the housing needs. And so the Gunnison County Housing Authority then became the Gunnison Valley Regional Housing Authority. And for the first time, and so Gunnison County is kind of segregated between ranchers in the south of the county, and then celebrities and a ski resort in the north of the valley. And so the city of Gunnison is in the south of the valley, and then you have Crested Butte, Mount Crested Butte in the north. And through the regional housing efforts, we had 3 different municipalities, as well as the ski resort, donate $1 million together by half an acre of land in Crested Butte and we built a 31 unit workforce housing project in Crestview. And that was the result of engagement and community cooperation that really wouldn't have happened without, certainly the need was there and the need was profound. It is profound still in those communities. But to have different municipalities give money to see housing located in a different, and then another municipality was quite short. And so that's a prime example of my efforts in outreach and community organizing to deal with issues that might affect the community.
Thank you. That is indeed a good example.
Commissioner Bailey.
Yes. Where were we? Getting tied up with housing here. Name one of your best accomplishments, including where the assignment came from, your plans in carrying it out, how you eventually did carry it out, and any obstacles you overcame. What types of problems do you most enjoy tackling? Give us some examples of such problems you face, and what did you enjoy about them?
Well, I'll switch to the private sector here. I probably right around the year 2000 or so, I was hired by a private development company who had signed up to become a franchisee for Red Robin restaurants. This is completely going away from housing. I had been a housing director in Sun Valley, Idaho at the time, and when I was first hired, Chris Stevens was the name of the owner of this development firm. I told Chris, I'm a housing guy. I don't know anything about restaurants. And when I was in business school, they told me the last thing you want to build are hotels or restaurants. I don't know if that I'm a good hire. His response was, we're smart guys. We'll figure it out. I spent the next 3 years building a lot of Red Robin restaurants in Chicago, Mexico, Nevada. The goal was to amass 30 Red Robins in 3 years before the initial public offering for Red Robin went public. And it was really a money grab for Chris. It educated me a whole lot about stress and stress management, because while we reached our goal, I think we wound up with 33 restaurants in 3 years. The amount of stress on me as an individual who was trying to meet a goal that I wouldn't say was imposed, but I take my goals very seriously, and it was a goal that was presented to me by hook or by crook. I wasn't going to fail. And so, I enjoyed getting to the accomplishment. I won't say I enjoyed the process the entire time, because when goals are placed before me, as I said, I don't know if it's a competitive spirit or what, I don't like to fail. And so I think the goal is seeing something come out of my actions and my commitment was certainly something I was proud of. But not all of the time did I enjoy myself in achieving that goal. I will say this, I do find a lot of pleasure in engaging people, and not all the time that I've engaged folks has it been pleasant. Quite frankly, some of the issues that I've dealt with in the communities where I've lived have not been well received from time to time. But being cordial and decent to people has never really been my problem. And so I've enjoyed all that I've done, publicly and privately, just for the sense of accomplishment. I think I've built over 3,000 units of housing, been part of entities that have built that housing in my career. I feel like I've impacted people for the better and things that I've done. That's really what I enjoy most. doesn't necessarily have to get there. Because sometimes, quite frankly, the path ain't that far. And the difficult issues that confront Leonardo County, there's no silver bullet. There's no magic wand we can wave. It's folks getting in the trenches, really working together to come up with solutions. That's the key. And so that's why I applied for this job. Quite frankly, I know the saying, have to pay for the view of the bay. I'm being the Traverse City native. I make more money where I am now. That's not the point. The point is, I believe in the Greater Traverse region. I've always loved Leelanau County. My family used to go by boat from our beach on West Bay on Old Mission to North Port to Gull Island as a kid several times in summer. I certainly have been part of the traffic problem since I haven't been living in the region, driving out Leelanau County as a tourist with my wife and kids. But, my passion for the area is why I applied. And I think, as I said, it's usually the accomplishments that give me pleasure. It doesn't necessarily have to be the travel to the destination and accomplishments that really give me the pleasure. It's the after effects. That probably didn't answer your question that well, but I'm sorry.
Commissioner Reston.
If you'll share with us, what was the riskiest decision you have made? Talk a little bit about the situation and what happened. And then tell us about a time when you had to make an unpopular decision and the results.
As far as the riskiest decision that I've made, I think certainly I've made some decisions in the private business world where when we were building restaurants, we took out a $50 million line of credit with, at that time, Tyco. I was in my early 30s at that time, and even though I wasn't the one that was ultimately guaranteeing that money, I knew the risks involved, and quite frankly, I found it extremely stressful. And I knew the only way to make a risky decision and sign on the dotted line with a significant amount of money at stake, money that was even worse than that it wasn't mine, was to work hard and be committed to seeing that project through. And that's why winding up with 33 stores at the end of 3 years and not 30, it was extremely stressful, and I thought a very risky move by Chris Stevens, who I consider to be a friend now. At that time, he was my boss and the owner of the company. But I thought that was an extremely risky move, which paid off well for him in the end. But there were times during that period of time where he was writing checks for $200,000 a month to meet payroll because we had so many new restaurants opening. So that to me is probably the riskiest thing, aside from, I don't know if any of you remember Don Melvoin. I moved to a house that Don Melvoin used to rent on Peninsula Drive. It was my farm on Old Mission. For me personally, it was risky in that I thought this house would be easy just to fix up, and for about $25,000, I thought I could do it all myself. Well, a couple $100,000 later, the house looks great now, but it was a process, I'll say that. So for me, that was a risky venture for me. And the second half of your question, can you restate that, please?
Sure. Tell us about a time when you had to make an unpopular decision.
That happens more frequently than I'd like to admit, but, I would state that, I had to dismiss an employee about 3 years ago who was very well liked by, all of his coworkers. And, I won't go into the reasons why, and I couldn't certainly divulge that to his coworkers. But I certainly had my board's support at the time because they knew some of the details. But it was an unpleasant decision for a relatively new director to an agency to have a lot of staff questioning a decision that I made. It was, I would say, 2 or 3/4 of the employees, it was a very unpopular decision. And because of the nature of confidentiality, it's not a decision that could be, the specifics couldn't be divulged. And so that was extremely challenging to hold the commission staff together. And I will say this, without the groundwork that was laid as far as team building and my honest dialogue with employees prior to that event, it would have made it for a very difficult situation. Time, it simply took time for the employees to, some trust was, I would say, shaken by my decision at that time. But I don't tend to hyperreact to anything, which I think is a good quality to have. And I stayed as calm and as even keeled as I possibly could during that time to show the employees that there was stability in the organization and trust the process.
Thank you, Mr. Fulmer. Thank you. No, thank you for responding. We're about out of time. Are there any last questions from commissioners as follow-up? We do appreciate your interest in the position, and we have some more interviews tomorrow. Then we'll be talking about all of you, and then we'll be getting back to you. Do you have any?
Thank you very much.
Do you have any questions?
Thank everybody for the opportunity to.
Patricia?
I was just going to ask if, Mr. Fulmer, if he had any questions for us.
Well, I'll just bring something up. I know that Leelanau has a lot of issues in front of it right now. I've read the ticker a couple of years in arrears up to the present day. Do the commissioners have a good sense of, I know that there's an election coming up too, so I won't go into that, but I read a lot about divisiveness in Leonard County and politics. I don't know who wants to field this question, one, but I did read that a lot of the candidates now do want to work together. I think that's a huge challenge with some of the issues facing the commission. What do all of you think of the working relationship between commissioners present?
Well,
I'm just a candidate, I can ask this.
I'll take that, and we don't have time to hear from everybody, but this group works pretty well together, and we have disagreements, but we have more agreements than we have disagreements. And we all, I think, work hard to represent our constituents. But I think we're running out of time. I don't know if I answered that enough, but that's all we got time
No,
for.
I mean, and that's how it usually is.
Right.
Most issues,
Right.
especially the tough ones.
The disagreements make the news sometimes.
I'm sure they do.
Very well said,
I'm sure
Ty.
they do.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's take a 5-minute break.
My coffee's cold.
Hi, Patricia.
Hey, Patrick, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Well, Mr. Lamb, thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
We have 45, 50 minutes to get to know you a little bit, and we first want each of the commissioners, and I think you know many of us, to take a minute and introduce them to us, and we'd like you to kind of introduce you to us, your interest. We've seen your paperwork,
Okay.
all your letters of recommendation, et cetera, but just why you're interested, and what brings you here.
Okay, you want me to start with that right
Start with
now?
that, and then we'll introduce each of us.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. My name is Pat Lamb. I live in Suttons Bay, 975 St. Michael's Highland. I've lived in Leelanau County for 26 years now. I was fortunate enough to move up to Traverse City area right out of college and took an internship at the Grand Traverse Resort and just fell in love with the region and the area as a whole. I decided at that time that I was going to stay and do whatever it took to stay in the area. But my degree at that time was in recreation and facilities management. So basically I had worked with the children that came to the Grand Traverse Resort, put together all the children's programs for business and industry. Not a lot of money in that, unfortunately, but with that came a passion for working with children. And so I reevaluated my situation and thought, what could I do differently to come back and live in this wonderful region? And I decided to leave the region, take a chance and go back to college and get my degree in education. And so I went down to Olivet College in the hopes that I would get back up to this area. And I was fortunate enough to get a student teaching placement at Suttons Bay. And I came up to Suttons Bay and student taught there. Taught there for about half a year before I was hired at Lake Leelanau St. Mary's, which was my first teaching position in Leelanau County. And I taught at St. Mary's for 3 years and coached football at Suttons Bay, at which time I decided to try to get into the public school. And I was hired at Suttons Bay School for a long-term sub-special ed placement. And I did that for about 4 months while there was a teacher out for a long-term position. And then Northport reached out to me and said, we have a challenging situation with a couple grades and we're looking for a person to come into that role. I interviewed for that position and was hired at Northport as a phys ed business and health teacher. And I stayed in that position for about 1.5 years before I was promoted and became the principal at Northport, which I did for 3 years. All in Leelanau County, and loved my time in Leelanau County. But then there was an opportunity with the ISD in career and technical education. And I went on to serve in that role as assistant principal, and assistant superintendent career and tech ed. And I've been there for the last 18 years, going into my 19th year. Why am I here? I have done 26 years in education, and I've loved every bit of it. And I got to tell you, the job that I'm in right now has been the most gratifying and satisfying opportunity that I have, because it's not only preparing students for what they're going to do post-secondary after high school, but it's working with business and industry and employers and trying to prepare those students to be ready for what business and industry is looking for. And I've done that at the highest level in a state acclaimed career and technical education center. And I have a wonderful superintendent that's a few years younger than me. And I hope for this region and for this ISD, he stays for another 10 years. And so I'm looking for a position that would allow me to be the executive in charge and use my skill set that I've worked on and crafted for the last 26 years in education to get back to the county that I live in and I've lived in for 26 years. And that is why I'm sitting here before you today.
Thank you. And we'll start with our longest serving commissioner.
Yes, good afternoon. I tried to tell you good morning. That's how this day has gone. So I am Melinda Lautner. I represent Solon and Casson Townships. And I farm and have a couple of seasonal farm markets. Keep me busy.
I'm Deb Rushton. I'm District 2 Commissioner, which is part of Elmwood and part of Bingham. I've been in the seat for 10 years, and I'm also a small business owner.
Rick Robbins, District 1, first term. My district, I think you're probably aware, covers half of Elmwood and annex part of the city. Retired law enforcement, father with daughter, 2020, Olivet.
Lois Bailey, newly elected in District 3 and retail retiree. And so now I have time for politics, I guess, and got my hands into the Star Baby. So here I am.
My name is Gwen Allgaier. I'm Commissioner for Cleveland Township, Glen Arbor, and Empire, our paradise and part of our paradise. This is my first term.
And as you probably know, I'm Patricia Sotislow, District 5 Commissioner, which is Leland and Senegal Township. Have been in the seat for 8 years and retired faculty from Michigan State University in biomedical engineering.
And I'm Ty Wessel from District 4 in Northport, Leelanau Township, and parts of Suttons Bay Township. Been sitting here, and you know Chet, one of the longest-serving county administrators in the state.
And a former ISD employee.
Well, thank you, everybody. Very nice to officially meet all.
We have a series of questions for you that we've kind of structured, and everybody will be taking their turn, but I get to ask you the first one. What is the most important responsibility of the county administrator, and what are the priorities and issues facing Michigan counties in general, and specifically Leelanau County?
I'd say specifically the top priority would be to serve the people of Leelanau County and to help with administering the county programs that are offered here in a way that serves the constituents and the people of this county. I think that takes place and occurs by working with the board, first and foremost, and having a shared vision that we can give to the people of Leelanau County. And it's created by this person in this role working with you, the board, in order to create that vision. I know there's a lot of varying opinions within the county right now, and I would say obviously politics as a whole is a challenge within the county, and there are many, many different opinions right now, and that's clear in watching board meetings that you folks have been having. And I think if we can try to create an atmosphere where politics are local within Leelanau County, more so than on a national level, I think that will benefit and help the folks in Leelanau County.
Thank you. Commissioner Rushton, you want to start out?
I will do that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question for you today is, I have to find it. For this board, please provide for us your definition of integrity, and in terms of ethics, the second half of the question is, what standards are you unwilling to compromise in your leadership role?
So for me, integrity is about honesty. It is about serving the values that I live morally, ethically. Integrity is doing the right thing when no one's watching, so that you're going to continue to do what it is that you believe in. It comes down to me, I'm not willing to lie, I'm not willing to be dishonest, I'm not willing to compromise those areas of my life in any position or role. Be that county administrator, be that principal, be that our assistant superintendent. Those are the values I live by, and I think that would be my definition of integrity.
Mr. Lamb, this board of 7 were to ask you about your current or former staff, how approachable you are, what would you say?
Well, I think, quite honestly, they sound very approachable. My door is open. It's an open door policy. I have tons of conversations, people in and out of my room at all times of the day. And that is everything from maintenance custodial to parapro teacher assistants, to administrative team and to teachers. There are tons of decisions on a daily basis that take place, some of which I feel like I'm well in a position to make that decision. And then I sit down with the person that it may affect, we have a conversation, and quite honestly, that decision may change based off of what I hear from the person that I'm working with. But I think you would hear from the vast majority that I am honest, I'm a good listener, and I'm fair. There's going to be a few in the bunch that are going to probably disagree with that, and that would be quite honestly because I've had to make a decision that may have affected them personally. But I'm always erring on the side of what's best for students in the role that I'm in, and that is how I make my decisions. And I think that's what you would hear from the people that work with me directly, is that his decisions are what's best for kids.
Thank you.
I'll ask you the next question. So time management and balancing multiple priorities is an important skill to be effective in this role. How do you make decisions on how you spend your time, and what strategies do you use for balancing multiple priorities?
I'd love to say I have a schedule that I keep to in the current role that I'm in. You go into the day and you've got your calendar, and you've got events planned. That changes, and that's working with different priorities depending on what's the situation of the day. In the role that I'm in, that may be going in and planning on having an interview or a meeting, and then there may be an unannounced lockout drill that takes place. There may be an angry parent that's standing in the hallway that has a question about a grade that their child had received, or how a matter was handled. In the role that I'm in right now, constantly it changes. And you have to figure out what's the most important, pertinent thing at that time to handle. And I may have to delegate it at that time, unfortunately. I have 3 assistant administrators in my building, and depending on what the situation is, I will handle what I feel I need to at that time. But it changes all the time. And you need to be organized, you need to carry a calendar, you need to know the events and what's taking place and what's happening, but you also have to be able to pivot when needed.
Thank you.
Mr. Lamb, I think I have the next question. What would be your approach to establishing and maintaining a good working relationship with the Board of Commissioners? That's the first part. And then what is your understanding of the role of county administrator relative to the Board of Commissioners?
Yeah, so I think it starts with conversation. I think it starts with meeting each individually and learning about each commissioner, the constituents within their area, region that they are from, finding out what is important and what initiatives you are currently working on, thoughts that you have. But it would start with individually meet with each and every one of you early on within the role. And then sitting with the board chair and having conversations, discussions about any initiatives that are currently ongoing, currently taking place, and the direction of the board and where you're heading and where you want to go. I think my role is facilitating and working with you on a strategic point of view for where the county is heading. The big ideas, the ideas of you looking down on the county and what we can do. And I know we've been talking about internet countywide as a topic in the area. And I hope we get that soon, because I was prepping today for this at my house, so I couldn't get online. But I think it involves those conversations, Patricia, individually, and then as a group, learning about challenges that are existing within the county, and really doing a full investigation and listening.
Thank you.
I think I'm up next. County government is a unique form of government. The Board of Commissioners and other elected officials, such as the clerk, the sheriff, and the treasurer, etc., are co-employers. Have you ever asked a coworker to perform a task that she refused? How did you resolve the conflict?
Yeah, usually, I guess the example that I would use most recently was some of the complications we had in working with COVID. And when we came back to school after COVID, there were some folks that felt like they didn't want to be in person at the time. And I think within our organization, as big as it is, there are probably factions within our organization where it would make sense that a person may be able to work from home. In my particular building and situation, which was teaching and education and being in front of kids, we needed to be there. And we needed to be there in a sense that we were working with hands-on applications for the most part. So it's challenging to teach welding online. We did it, and we did it well, and we did electrical, we did that well. IT and some of those courses, I think, were much easier to do online. But that would have been a situation where we would go back and forth, and it came to fruition because they realized it was in the betterment of education for students at that time. And so it worked out. But it works out with having a conversation and listening. It happens with grades when parents come in out of concern. And you work with the parent and you work with the teacher. And you come to fruition and agreement on what could be done to maybe make that situation work for the student as well as the concern.
Describe the experience you have had in disciplining and/or dismissing an employee and steps you followed in the process.
In education, I would say it's oftentimes a little bit easier to try to coach someone out of a position, meaning someone that has been in the classroom that maybe isn't doing as good of a job as you would hope they would be doing. So I've had those conversations where we've sat down across from each other, and in a situation I'm thinking of, I convinced the person to switch roles from the lead teacher to a parapro. And in all honesty, that position worked out much better for the teacher because that person was able to fit into that role better and be the lead person in the classroom. That's a minor situation. I would tell you a major one that I dealt with was a little more challenging, and that was a situation that involved a teacher that had attempted to kiss a student during summer. And that teacher, it was reported to me after I was across town coming back from a meeting, was on site. So that investigation started with me coming back to the building and sitting down with him right after learning about that. In that role, I took copious notes, asked complicated questions I felt, and it was fortunate that I had, because from the time that we had that conversation and the notes I'd taken, within about a day or two, he had lawyered up and the situation had changed quite drastically. Trying to make a long story a little bit shorter, when the steps with prosecution and resigning from the role that they were in took a long time. And there was obviously attorneys involved at that point. What came out of it was this person had been, when it hit the news, it was found that he had in fact abused other students, at least one, in another situation that student came forward. And he was prosecuted and he did go to jail and was in prison for I believe 18 months. That was probably the most complicated situation that I had to deal with in my role as a principal and disciplining professional.
Thank you. There's more to this question. Tell us about a time when you had to give feedback to an employee who displayed a lack of professionalism, and actually that was a great example, wasn't it, in their work relationship, and what did you say? What standards did you set?
Yeah, so I think that takes place when the teacher evaluation process that I work in, and I'm quite familiar with. But when a teacher is not handling situations within the classroom at a level that you would like to see them at, you sit down and you talk about it. It's usually lack of lesson planning, it's usually lack of preparation. It's a challenging conversation to have because many folks believe that they're doing the best that they can do. And so you ask questions. Tell me what training time you put into this. What could you have done differently? Did you think the students in the classroom were paying attention and listening at the time? And you have that conversation and you get to a place where hopefully there's some agreement and you put a plan in place. I put teachers on plans of improvement, and that's a process after the evaluation takes place for the whole next year. You set bars, you set standards, and they have to meet those or they're going to be removed. And that's just a process within teaching that goes on pretty regular with administration. And on the contrary, and if it's someone that's doing a wonderful job, you make note of that, you tell them that, you encourage that, and you model that. And that person gets to go into other classrooms and share what it is that they're doing so well.
Thank you. One more. Have you ever been a member of a group where two of the members did not work well together? And how did you get them to create a team atmosphere?
Yeah, I think again, it's communication, it's being open, it's being honest, it's having conversations that are uncomfortable at times. But it's sitting between the two folks, and usually they're somewhere in the middle with their opinions. They're not going to be all right on one end and all right on the other. But it's having direct conversations and listening and being factual about it and what can you do to improve upon it. It's not going to get better unless you talk about it. And walking around angry and ignoring the situation and letting it fester is going to make it worse.
Thank you.
Mr. Lamb, would you please describe to this board your experience with budget development, financial management, and developing grant proposals?
So my role with working with the budget within the ISD is I run the Career Tech Center. It's close to about a $12 million budget. We have a CFO and a finance director that I work directly with in developing the cost within each program. So each program that we offer, 21, has a budget. Out of that budget will be textbooks, teacher salary, any curriculum expenses, capital outlay, and equipment. My role is going to both Linda and Sean, sitting down with them again. You're looking at the existing budget that we have within the building, within each program, and explicitly having conversations about what changes may take place within that role. So are we going to need to put a $70,000 hoist in our auto mechanic shop? That's not going to happen every year. It's going to happen about every 20 years. But making sure that that conversation takes place so those dollars can be set aside within the budget. I'm responsible for procurement within that building. So if we're going to purchase something that is under $5,000, okay, we can go ahead and take care of that. But if it's over 5, I need to get 3 bids on that. And if it's over 25, it's going to go to a formal bid process. I don't put the formal bid processes together, but I work with the contractors that are supplying the bids. They're done through our CFO and our business director. So I'm directly involved in those sides of the budget process. As far as grants go, one of the biggest grants that I work with within the Career Tech Ed world is the Federal Purpose Grant. And so that is a grant that is given for students that are involved in career and technical education, state approved. That's a process that we go through and formalize on a yearly basis by entering the data that we need to enter within the federal application so that we can continue to get our dollars for career and technical education. We work with, as an ISD, SHRM to put that together, as well as Dr. Masaki. That's the biggest grant that I'm familiar with within the career technical side. And then I've been a part of putting together grant proposals for specific equipment. For instance, we did a competitive grant for manufacturing equipment. And that was putting together a proposal with multiple manufacturing players within the Grand Traverse region so that we could get their support in order to apply for the grant. And that was a competitive grant of $585,000 that we received. So peripherally on the grant process and budget-wise, within my building, I'm responsible for the dollars that are spent there. But I sit down with Linda and I sit down with Sean, and we develop that grant together, or that budget together.
Okay, thank you.
So have you had an opportunity to research the county's past audits? If so, what is your impression of the county's financial condition?
I have not sat down and researched that. My understanding from conversations that I've had is the county sits in a pretty good financial position. I heard a lot of that language when, quite honestly, when the application role for this person, I watched a lot of the meetings that you hosted with that, and it sounded like the audit and finances within the county are sitting in a real good position.
Mm-hmm. And could you describe your experience in establishing a budget accountability system?
So within my building, that accountability is each instructor has a budget that they have to adhere to. That changes on an annual basis. If those dollars are spent outside of the budget, then I get contacted by our business office person Then I sit down with the instructor and we have a conversation about what's the need, why have we overspent on the budget, is this directly going to affect instruction or students, where have the dollars that were put aside for this gone. Typically for teachers within my programs, they are ordering something that they haven't taken a look at and realize necessarily cost in comparison to where their budget stands. And then we have to have a conversation about that need and if it exists. And if I have to find funds for that out of my contingency line, or it's not a purchase that we're going to allow or do because it's not in the best interest of certain students at this time and it can wait.
Thank you.
I think I'm up next. What are the 3 effective leadership qualities you think are most important? How have you demonstrated these qualities in your past or current position?
For me, I've always equated myself to what I would call servant leadership. I've been in roles where I feel that my role has been to service, whether it's our constituent districts from the ISD, whether it's the students. So the roles that I think are important in that position, listening, honesty, empathy, would be the 3 that I would stress that I think have made me a successful leader. With that is a knowledge of the job and what you need to know to do that job. But I think those are 3 skill sets that lend themselves to being a servant leader. And that would be the role that I would define myself as.
Thank you.
Patrick, I have the next question. Can you describe the methods you would use to effectively relate to and work with elected officials and with the leaders in our community as well as the community itself? And then the second part of that is, give us an example where you built collaborative partnerships.
I think again, it's really communication and being out and being seen and having conversations. I'm not one that has been known to be sitting in the office in the building. In the role that I'm in, every one of our programs has a business and industry advisory board, meaning that decisions get made about our programs with teachers and educators, a parent, at least one, but at least 7 business and industry partners for each program sit on those advisory boards. And so I would say we've developed a really robust partnership within the community to have those relationships. And those are the folks that we converse with and talk about when we're going to buy a $70,000 car list, or we're going to buy a plasma cutter for a welding program, or we're going to look at investing $75,000 in a new greenhouse renovation. We're going to sit down with business and industry folks and talk about that. So I think in this role, it's getting out and having conversations with elected officials. It's getting out and speaking and talking with people in the county and listening and hearing what it is that everybody is looking for and wanting at the same time. I would tell you the biggest collaboration process that I have been a part of and gone through for us, for me, was bringing academics into the career and technical education field. That was a huge undertaking and challenge, but back in 07, 08, when the Michigan merit curriculum changed, and it went from a mandatory 1 credit to graduate from the state of Michigan to about 18 mandatory credits, the state stepped in and said 4 years of math, 4 years of English, 3 years of science, 2 years of foreign language. It limited the amount of time a student could take elective classes. So what we did at the Career Tech Center, which was at the time a thought of, is we felt that you could teach English in some of our courses. We felt that math absolutely could be taught in our courses, that they had to be taught by highly qualified English and math teachers. So we had to go out and bring in academic teachers to teach in welding and electrical occupations. And we were fighting against a lot of forces. So if you think about it, career technical education, a welding teacher doesn't want to give up their time to have a math teacher come in and teach math, even if it's the right thing to do. Our local districts do not want to have their evaluation of how they're providing education in English and math taught by the ISD and not teachers that they hire within their building. So we had to convince local districts, 16 public districts, a couple private districts, that we were going to teach English at the same level and ability that they were teaching it in their school. I had to convince career tech education folks around the state that it could be done and it could be done at a high level. And I had to convince teachers that were teaching English and math that we weren't trying to put them out of a job, that we were doing this because it was what's best for kids. And if you've got a law enforcement student, I think writing skills are very important, and English can be taught in a public safety classroom by a highly qualified English teacher. And so I would say that that in itself was bringing together a bunch of people that were looking at things differently. And we did what was best for kids. It's been recognized by Michigan Department of Education as a practice of excellence. We have people come up from around the state to see what it is we do. But it was bringing the collaboration of the local districts, our teachers within our building, the English and math teachers that we hired to deliver what was right for our students. It was not an easy battle, it was a hard battle, and I could get into more specifics about how that goes, but I will tell you that we used to have a contract that we had to have students sign and parents sign. That's all gone away, and I would tell you, if we didn't offer English and math now in our programs, our local districts would be screaming, why are you not doing that, why'd you let it go? And that is completely contrary to what it was when we started that journey.
Thank you for that good example.
Thank you.
So it seems very much like you've answered some of this question. Name one of your best accomplishments, including where the assignment came from, your plans in carrying it out, and how you eventually did carry it out, and any obstacles you overcame. What types of problems do you most enjoy tackling? Give us some examples of such problems you faced, and what did you enjoy about them?
Well, I enjoy accomplishing them, I'll tell you that one, because it's a lot of hard work leading up to that. And, you know, we're on another journey right now with competency-based education, and so it's the same thing. We're trying to get away from point stacking and grades by percentages, and the student saying to the teacher, what do I need to do to get the A?
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're trying to say it's not about the A. It's about what do I need to know to show you that I've learned the skill you're asking me to do. And so now we're on this journey where we're away from grades in our building. It's taken 5 years. We're there now. But now we've got to transition what we're recommending back to our local districts again, because they want percentages and grades in the book, because that's the way it's always been done. But if you're going to hire an electrician, does it mean that you're getting a good electrician? Or does that student showing and demonstrating that they can do the code book the way it needs to be done and doing the skill set that we're asking them to do make more sense? And I would argue the latter. I like those challenges. They are very hard to get to the point. They involve a ton of conversation. They involve a lot of convincing. But we're at that point now, and that will be the next initiative that I hope I can talk about as well as I did the first one. It's been a 5-year process with the building split, and the teachers are all doing it now. And there was resistance to begin with. But when you convince teachers that it's about what's best for kids, and you can demonstrate and show that, and you can demonstrate that to parents, and the parents that typically call that are upset about the competencies are typically the high flyers that have always gotten the 100% and the A's, because now it's having that conversation and convincing them that competency base is better for their student than that.
If I may ask, what was the riskiest decision you have had to make? Tell us about the situation and what happened. And then tell us about a time when you had to make an unpopular decision.
Okay, let me think through that. You know, a risky one at one point in time was my actual first move up to the area. I was coming up and I was offered an opportunity at Grand Traverse Resort and Ames Orchards. Those were the two that were in my field of recreation. And so I was in a position where I worked all through college, and I was working bartending at a nice establishment in downtown Mount Pleasant, making money, had my life kind of figured out, but I needed to do this internship to graduate. And I had no car, I had no vehicle. I had a friend driving me up for the interviews. I spent 3 hours convincing the director of the health club at the resort to take a chance on me because she had had previous students with CMU and it didn't work out. She decided to take a chance. The next thing, I found a place to live in the paper, 3 Mile in Vanderlip, which I was told was a mile or so from the resort. I think it's about 7 or 8 miles. And I hitchhiked for the first time in my life because I got brought up by a friend, took me to the gas station. I think I had about $17 left on the Discover card. I bought some bologna and orange juice. Moved into this house with a bunch of guys that I did not know at all. Didn't feel even comfortable asking them to take me to work the next day. I got up extra early, started walking down 3 Mile Road, and realized it was a lot further than I had thought. And I couldn't be late because I spent 3 hours convincing Carolyn to give me that opportunity. So I would put my thumb out at a minivan as it went by, and I'd pull it back in as the minivan went by because I thought that was safe. And eventually I found someone near a gas station that I asked if I could get a ride, and they took me to the resort. I think the point of that story is just to move to an area where I had no friends, I knew nobody up here. I had no vehicle. I got to work every day after that day, somehow for a year and a half before I was going to have a vehicle. I didn't have a bicycle, so I got rides and I worked long hours. There were days I worked doubles just because I didn't have a ride. So that would be the risk that I took coming to this area. And look where I'm sitting now after making that comfortable decision for me would have been, I'll just stay in Mount Pleasant and I'll figure out the degree at a later date. I don't know how it worked out. It did. But I look back on those times and think, wow, I can't believe I did it. There was more to that question though, wasn't there?
The second half of that question was, tell us about a time when you had to make an unpopular decision. You know, maybe with a staff person or.
Well, I mean, I can talk about one that I still know makes some people upset at the place I'm at. We had a teacher assistant that did a wonderful job for us. He worked in one of our programs. We had a need in another program because a teacher left mid-year. This young person went into that role as a lead teacher. He did a good job in that role. He then, I think I'm trying to get all together. Long story short, he was an employee that did a really, really good job. We then had an opening in the program that he had been in as a teacher assistant, and he wanted it. He interviewed for it. He interviewed very well for it. But we had another gentleman that had all the credentials that had, and this first one did not have the credentials, but the second one did. The second one was every bit outstanding as the assistant I'm talking about and more. I made the right decision in who I hired. I hired the second one, who was certified, has done a knockout job in our program, has built enrollment, and is doing things that are transcending in that program. It was a very hard decision because this person had done everything right up to that point. But I hired the right person, and I know there are still people that are affected by that in the building to this day. And I am when I see him out because he's in the home. And I see him on a regular basis. I don't have any doubt I made the right call, but it's still hard.
Mr. Lamb, we really thank you for your interest, and we're going to talk about you, and we've got some more interviews tomorrow, and then we'll be in touch. But before you leave, I want to give you an opportunity to ask us some questions if you have any, or any last questions from commissioners if they have any. So let's start with you. Any questions?
What's your ideal candidate? What are you looking for?
Anybody want to take that?
I think we could get 7 different answers for that question.
Well, I hope I answered some of them. Of the 7.
But we did collectively develop that in the brochure that you looked at, and that was our collective view on ideal candidate.
What kind of, someone gonna add? Oh, timeline wise, what are you thinking here? I know that's been talked about some too. As far as finishing the process and get selected, bringing someone on board, what are the hopes of the board?
We're going to talk about some of that tomorrow after our interviews tomorrow. We're not in a rush, and we want to find the right candidate. And Chet agreed to stay on another couple of years if we want him to.
I looked at that in the office there with the names on there, and you got it by far. You want to add to that?
We want to complete the process whenever we feel like we've done it well and we're done.
Fair enough. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate it, and I thank you for your time. And I look forward to hearing from you soon.
Thank you. Thank you
very
so much. Thank you.
Mr. Lamb, there's one thing I will add, that when you told your story about from 3 Mile to Resort, you didn't tell about 3 feet of snow and walking barefoot.
There was, for me, I came off, if I gotta remember, I think I came on, I know there was no snow.
But you know, today it's more risky. Because back then, there's probably about 3 cars every 5 minutes. Now there's probably 100 cars every 30 seconds.
That's crazy road with all the new schools there, those weren't there. Which is the golf course was there,
Did you live right on the corner?
right on the corner.
Yeah, I know right where the house
That place
is.
has been, I can't tell you how many different.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I first came up, that's where I was at. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
you. Thank you. We, before we go to public comment, we have 3 interviews tomorrow. And then when we're done with those 3, and we may have a 4th one if we hear from the candidate we missed today. If commissioners are willing, we will spend a little bit of time debriefing and processing next steps. So you probably plan on 1 at the latest if we have a 4th interview, or 1:30 maybe. Because we're not going to make decisions tomorrow, we're just going to get plans to move forward. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yep.
Patricia, okay with you? Okay, at this time, we have public comment. Yes, Steve.
Good afternoon. My earlier presentation, we trust that this commission will seriously consider this. Otherwise, the future for Leelanau County residents on this issue is going to be very murky. We heard some of the candidates and talk about leadership. I think when you talk to most citizens, they don't want to be led anywhere. They want to be left alone. But as commissioners, we pepper people with self-initiated projects. 3 of them I can recall in the last 30 years to tax people some more. We'll never petition for one, but you guys just keep on adding millions and never reducing the base tax. First candidate here was talking about the food industry, and we're very familiar. Our company used 22 million pounds of sliced apples a year. And we use millions of pounds of cherries, so I'm very familiar with that gentleman when he was talking about the cherry marketing institute. I'll leave with you the copies of the document that I read. The copy has been given to the press. And we hope that this will take into consideration for tomorrow morning as a together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Makowski, would you give an extra copy to the clerk for Commissioner Sotis Little?
She got one this morning, but
Oh,
I'll give her one for
okay.
the extra copy.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Any commissioner comment? May we adjourn? A motion to adjourn?
So moved. Support.
Thank you.
Thank you.